Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. I thought it was high tide that I talk about this camera here, which is the Ricoh GR. So this is the 2013 edition, so the Mk1 Ricoh GR. The naming convention is a little bit confusing because I've also got the Ricoh GR Digital 1 here, which is a much older camera, released around 2005 I think, whereas this one here is 2013. So they're definitely, you can tell that they're from the same ilk, but there's a lot of differences in terms of that this one is a small sensor, whereas this one is an actual aps-c size sensor, hence why it's a little bit bigger in terms of its form factor. But anyway, I'm still keeping the original one because it's great for black and white images in particular, but not so great with colour images. Even though it's got a CCD sensor in it, I don't generally like the colour images that this camera produces, and it's only an 8 megapixel small sensor, so it's not particularly good at low light either. Not to say that this one's great either, but this one is much worse. But anyway, I will be doing an update on this video in the near future because it's probably coming up to about 20 years old now from when it was first released. But anyway, today I'm talking about the latest GR that I bought, which is this one. So why did I decide to buy a Ricoh GR in 2024 we are now? So like I said with the Ricoh GR, I love using this one, but I don't generally find it's very good as an everyday camera. It's great for like a specific purpose. If I want to go out and take gritty black and white filmic images, then I will definitely recommend the Ricoh GR Digital 1. It's, like I said, it's not very good as an everyday camera. I wanted something which wouldn't compromise on the quality that I was looking for. I didn't particularly want to use a mobile phone, even though they're all the rage these days. I know their limitations in terms of their ease of use, the handling, and the sensor size on mobile phones is not great. So I knew, because I'm a photographer, an amateur photographer, that sensor size is quite important when you're trying to do photography in a more serious way. So I knew that I wanted something with a larger sensor in order to maintain the quality that I'm craving for in an everyday camera, or an EDC, which seems to be all the rage on YouTube at the moment. So obviously, because I had the old GR, I was immediately drawn to the newer GR series because of that form factor, the one-handed use, all the controls which can be operated using one hand, which is rare on a proper camera these days, as well as the modes like the snap focus, so you can set it up at a certain distance, and then you can just literally do a full press and it'll capture the scene with that focus point where you want it, ideally. Or you can just do a traditional method of half press, focus on the subject you want, and then a full press to capture that, because obviously snap focus can be a little bit hit and miss depending on where your subject falls in the picture, whether it is on that predefined snap focus distance or whether it's just outside of it. And I have had some successes and failures, as I'm sure everyone with a Ricoh GR has, but it's still a good fun camera to use. So that's why I was drawn to the GR. Hopefully better colour results than the GRD. I then obviously forgot about the GR series for a while, because one thing that kept putting me off was the extremely high prices that these cameras were going for. Even the original GR here was going for crazy money, and the GR2, which doesn't have a great deal more improvements over the original GR, was going for a similar price to the latest, the GR3. So yeah, so they were like going for about £800-900 I saw them at the time, so that was like, I didn't even spend that much on my main cameras until I bought the R8, and the R8 still only cost me about £1,000, so to sink another 900 on something like this was a little bit unthinkable initially. So then obviously I looked around at what else I could do as an alternative to the Ricoh GR, and to be honest, none of them really have that balance of simplicity, one-handed operation, and compactability. Is that a word? Pocketability, is that a word as well? I don't know, but something that you could just slip into any pocket. And alternatives, there's not that many of them, to be honest. I did briefly look at the Micro Four Third options, so I looked at a GM1, a GM5, or a GX 800 series camera, and I used to have a GM1, a Panasonic GM1, which I stupidly sold for about £100, because nowadays they're going for absolutely crazy money, and that's before you even then add on a compact lens like the 12 to 32, and then you're looking at probably like another £100 plus for getting that lens. So the prices of those cameras started to creep up into the GR price bracket, really, when you, certainly the GR1 price bracket. And and also as well, when I looked at it, the package with a body and a lens would have been much heavier than a GR, as well as it being a bit bulky as well. The body, don't get me wrong, the bodies are great and slim, but as soon as you then pack a lens onto the front, there's something like the 12 to 32 where you've got to open it before you can use it. It just lacked that thing I was looking for, really, which was like something that I could just slip in and out of a pocket and then literally turn it on and it would be like ready to use pretty quickly, really. Whereas I think with the other cameras I looked at, there was going to be more of a delay from getting out of a big pocket, a bag, into a shooting position. Of course, as well, you've got small Olympus Micro Four Thirds cameras as well, the Olympus EP7, which although actually is small, it does actually weigh 337 grams before you even add a lens, whereas if you compare that to the GR with a lens, I think this weighs less than about 250 grams, so it's, yeah, you just, it feels substantial in the hand, but not heavy, if that makes sense. It just feels robust. I then as well looked at some Fujifilm alternatives. You've got the original Fujifilm XM1, which is a small original X-Trans 1 sensor camera, but I've got the XE1, which is an original X-Trans sensor camera, so I didn't really think that the XM1 would give me much more than what I already have access to. And then I looked as well at the other Fujifilm compact alternatives, the XF10, the X70, but those prices seem to be crazy high as well at the moment, considering the age of those cameras. And from when I looked into it, there's compromises compared to what the Ricoh GR offers. I also looked at a camera called the Nikon Coolpix A, which did get a lot of good reviews, and it only weighed about 300 grams with its lens, so it wasn't out there. But the problem with the Coolpix is that they were extremely rare in the UK, so rare means expensive. So if I ever did track one down, it's likely that they would probably be in the same ballpark as a Ricoh. So in the end, I wasn't really convinced by any of the other propositions from the other camera manufacturers, and I managed to spot a really good deal on MPB, again not sponsored, so I snapped this one up back in May for about £550, which still, when I say out loud, sounds like a lot, but obviously I think the GR3s at the time were over £1,000 new, and they were quite rare, like the Fujifilm X100 series of cameras are. And I know I didn't talk about the Fuji X100 series cameras as being a potential everyday camera, but they're not exactly pocketable. Yeah, the X100 series cameras, they can weigh anything between 450 and 500 grams, so nearly double the weight of the Ricoh GR series, and certainly a lot bigger as well. It's been 5 months now, so I feel like I can offer my experiences and thoughts with using this camera, and I'll just split it up into some positives and some negatives. And I've probably talked about some of them already in terms of why I bought this camera in the first place. What does it offer that my other cameras don't? And that's definitely the ability to just go out with this, you know, not having to take a bag with my bigger, heavier cameras. If I just want to go light, this just slips in your pocket. And yeah, that's definitely one of the main benefits and positives of this camera, and the fact that it's very lightweight, very pocketable, and very easy and simple to use. And I touched on this earlier as well, but it feels great in the hand. You know, you can easily use it one-handed operation, even though some of the controls do sit where your thumb tries to find a home. I don't tend to find that I knock any of the buttons. So yeah, it definitely feels good in the hand, solid in a reassuring way, but not overly heavy. Obviously it's heavier than my original Ricoh GR Digital, which weighs 200 grams as opposed to 245 grams, so not a lot in it. Just like I said, just a little bit wider, I'd say, a little bit deeper, but very similar design ethos. Obviously it's a fixed lens camera, so it has a 28mm wide angle lens and with an aperture of f2.8, and truthfully 28mm for me is a little on the wide side, but I just generally find it really works well in the Ricoh, you know, especially in urban environments. Like I went to London soon after I bought this camera, and it's just the environment that I feel that it was designed for. It just excelled. It's very discreet to use, near silent in operation. So yeah, the 28mm I find is a great balance for this camera. And I know the GR3X you can get, it's got a 40mm, but I just feel that would be too tight. Like, it's nice to have the option on this to crop down to 38 to 35 and 47 in a pinch, albeit you do lose resolution, but I do think you can get away with using it at 35mm as well as its native 28mm focal length. Yeah, it's just a joy to use. The user interface is extremely responsive to navigate around, considering this is an 11-year-old camera. It does feel very intuitive to use. There's some nice shortcuts, you know, if you wanted to set the snap focus distance without diving into the menus, you know, you just hold the macro button down and then you scroll and you can change the snap focus distance, which is very handy, especially when you see a scene that you want to capture out in the field. I was a little bit concerned with battery life. Like I said, this is an 11-year-old camera, so the battery life is probably not at its best, but I do find, like, I went out and used it for about 7 days on and off, and what we're playing with it a little bit more as well, because I was setting up all the settings, it did last for a reasonable amount of time, and I haven't yet felt the need to buy a second battery, because I don't tend to go out and use it loads. You know, it's great just to, if you want to just go out and take a camera but not overburden yourself with like your bigger cameras, you just take that in just in case you see any moments that you want to capture along the way. You know, like I said, it's great just to take it out, turn it on, take a photo really quickly, and then put it back in your pocket and just carry on with what you were doing. It's just so, yeah, I love using this camera. It's just so fun. But anyway, so that's probably most of the positives that I feel like I've covered off. I'll just talk about some of the negatives, because there are some downsides I find to the Ricoh GR, with one big one in particular, which might be the reason why I end up getting rid of this camera, but I'll talk about more of that later on. It is a positive as well as a downside, but the images that come out of this are extremely sharp. I think it's probably the sharpest lens that I own, and that is good in a lot of respects, but I do sometimes feel that images can be a little bit over sharp and they come across quite harsh. So unusually when I edit my photos, I normally have to try and knock some of that sharpness off as well, just to make it look a little bit more pleasing to my eye. And even though I said at the start that I was looking forward to using it in lower light situations, compared to my original GR digital, although with this one you almost bump up the ISO in order to get those real gritty film-like monochrome images. But I still find with this one, even though it has an aps-c size sensor in it, that it's not great at high ISOs, probably above about 1600. I find that images quickly turn to mush and you lose a lot of details. So I don't tend to find that it's like it. Don't get me wrong, it is good in low light as long as you can keep the ISO down, I find. And when I've used this in conjunction with my Fujifilm X-E1, which is also an aps-c size sensor, I do tend to find that the Fujifilm does handle those higher ISOs a lot better. Images certainly look a lot cleaner on the Fuji compared to the Ricoh. So another one on the images, the results. I don't actually like the colours, whether that's the JPEG colours or the colours that are embedded in the actual DNG file when you take it into your editing program. So for me, Lightroom as well, that doesn't match the profiles which are embedded in the camera, so you're left with some real generic type Adobe profiles, and I just really find it hard to find a decent starting position in order to then work with it to get the image to where I want it to be. I think the one saving grace is that this camera has effects, but to be honest, again, I don't particularly find most of them that great. The only two which I tend to use are the high contrast black and white, but I tend to use that to help me visualize a scene in black and white in the camera, but then when I get it back into Lightroom, I'll apply some of my other monochrome profiles and presets, or use Silver FX Pro to convert the image into monochrome, and I find that does a much better job at converting the image to monochrome. But like I said, it is nice in camera to see what an image will look like in monochrome, and that effect is useful for that. The other effect that I quite like as well is positive film, and I know this is probably why people stick with these original GRs and the GR2, because some people do say that the positive film effect is different between the 16 meg Ricoh GRs and then the newer 24 meg Ricoh GR. But anyway, I can attest to the fact that the positive film effect is a pretty cool film simulation. But again, the problem is that's only on the JPEG, because when you open up the raw file in Lightroom, you only get access to generic Adobe profiles. But saying that, I did manage to find from this video here some Lightroom presets which simulate that positive film effect to a pretty good degree, and I tend to use these now with a few tweaks just to give myself like a good positive film starting position, and in some cases as well I feel that it does a better job than the straight out camera JPEG positive effect image. So that is one saving grace. But in terms of if I don't like the positive film effect, I do find it hard to edit images in Lightroom, at least trying to, yeah, I just haven't really found it that easy to edit the RAW files from this camera if I don't want that positive film effect. So looking at some of the other negatives, like I said, it's still a little bit heavier than the original Ricoh GRD, only about 50 grams and a little bit bigger, but I do think that compromise was worth it, just to get the bigger size sensor into these cameras. And another downside is the video mode. I think it's probably the worst video I've seen out of the device, and I took this clip here now when I was at Stourhead a few months ago, and as you could probably see, it's pretty unusable. I think if I was to want to shoot video in a pinch, I'd probably just grab my phone, because I'm sure it probably does a better job. Yeah, I think I touched on it earlier, but it doesn't have an EVF, so you're reliant on using the back screen to compose your images, which thankfully is quite large, and it's a good quality screen. So I don't find composing images using the back screen that much of a hassle, although obviously, like with phones, it does become a challenge when the conditions are overly bright and sunny. You can get optional EVFs which do attach to the Ricoh, but I think it would ruin its pocketability a little bit and its form factor. It will look a little bit more obvious when you're out shooting, because I think that's just moving back into the positive section at the moment. Like when you do take this out and people notice you, they don't really think that it's like a good camera. You know, they'll still might take offence, because I do find that people are a lot more twitchier these days with having their photo taken, especially in public. But I definitely feel that you can probably get away with a lot more with a camera like this than you could if you whipped out your DSLR or your mirrorless full frame camera, etc. Yeah, it's a lot more discreet, and you take it to events and use it, and I think people are always surprised at how good the images turn out. So I mentioned it as a positive earlier, but it's also a negative as well, in that you can use crop modes on this. So it's 28mm native, but you can crop into 35 and 47 millimeters, and of course you take a bit of a resolution hit with that. Like, it's a 16 meg camera anyway at 28 millimeters. If you go into 35, it's already down to 10 meg, and then if you go into 47 millimeters, you're down to about 5.5 megs. So resolution quickly takes a hit, and it's one of the advantages of the GR3, because it's a higher megapixel camera. Cropping in doesn't tend to lose you as much resolution. It depends on what editing software you use, but if you use Lightroom, if you crop in to 47 millimeters, for instance, in Lightroom, when you open the RAW file, you'll just see that 47 millimeter view. So you've lost the other information if you wanted to kind of undo that crop. But what I found when I used certainly an old version of my DxO Photolab is that it did actually retain all of the information in the original RAW file, as well as giving you like the cropped view. So that's definitely a good option if you regret cropping in and you might have wanted to take a different like crop. So it's good that there is that option in some of the software out there. Right, so due to my lack of refinement, I would say, when I produce these videos, this Ricoh GR video is turning into a bit of a monster. So what I've decided to do is just stop this part here, and I will put together another video filming the concluding part, which will talk about my main issue with the Ricoh GR1 I had, which was the dust issue, and then also to explain what I did next. So, as always, thanks for watching. Bye for now.